When was the last time you felt completely lost in a spiritual desert? That moment when the barrenness seemed to drain every drop of hope, when the scorching heat of trials threatened to suffocate your faith. It's precisely in this desolate setting that Isaiah 43:20 emerges as an oasis of revelation. The wild animals will honor me, the jackals and the ostriches, for I will provide water in the wilderness and rivers in the wasteland to give drink to my people, my chosen ones. This isn't just a poetic promise. It's a revolutionary declaration about the identity of God's chosen ones and the supernatural care He manifests in the most unlikely places. The desert, a universal symbol of scarcity and death, becomes the stage for one of the most extraordinary displays of divine favor. What does it mean to be a chosen one who receives water in the desert? How can this ancient truth completely transform your faith experience today? Why does God choose to manifest His power precisely when everything around you seems dead and barren? Hello, I'm Mario Perez from the Words Evidence channel, and today we're going to unravel one of the deepest mysteries of Scripture, the transformative truth about God's chosen ones, revealed in Isaiah 43:20. If you're going through a desert in your life, if your faith is being tested beyond its limits, comment now "water in the desert" and get ready for a revelation that will revolutionize your spiritual journey. To fully grasp the depth of Isaiah 43:20, we first need to contextualize this passage. The book of Isaiah was written during a time of great turmoil for the people of Israel. The nation faced the threat of Assyrian invasion and later Babylonian exile, literal national deserts that threatened their existence. It's in this setting of apparent abandonment that God delivers one of the most powerful promises of restoration. The term chosen in Hebrew is bachir, which carries the sense of someone set apart for a specific purpose, selected not by their own merit but by God's sovereign decision. This choice is neither random nor arbitrary. It's intentional and laden with divine purpose. When God says, "My chosen," He is declaring a relationship of ownership and responsibility. He chooses and He sustains. The metaphor of water in the desert is particularly significant in the Middle Eastern context, where water scarcity meant the difference between life and death. By promising water in the wilderness and rivers in the wasteland, God isn't just speaking of comfort, but of survival, of miraculous intervention when all natural resources have run dry. Notice that the promise begins with a surprising statement. The wild animals will honor me, the jackals and the ostriches. Why does God mention these wild creatures before speaking of His chosen people? This detail reveals a transformative principle. God's care is so abundant that it overflows beyond its primary target. When God intervenes to bless His chosen ones, even the surrounding environment is positively impacted. This passage resonates deeply with other biblical texts that reinforce God's pattern of extraordinary manifestation in impossible circumstances. It reminds us of the water that sprang from the rock for the Israelites in Exodus 17, the oil that never ran out for the widow in 1 Kings 17, the manna that fell from heaven when there was no food. The God revealed in Isaiah 43:20 is consistent. Throughout the biblical narrative, He specializes in creating abundance where there is only scarcity. The deepest theological truth of this passage is that God doesn't remove His chosen ones from the desert. He transforms the desert around them. This revelation directly challenges shallow theology that promises believers a life free of difficulties. The true miracle isn't escaping the desert, but experiencing supernatural provision in the midst of it. The spiritual journey of God's chosen ones often follows a paradoxical pattern. It's precisely in the desert that we discover who we truly are. When all distractions are stripped away, when conventional resources run out, when competing voices fall silent, that's when we can most clearly discern God's voice and our true identity in Him. Consider the experience of John the Baptist, who spent years in the desert before emerging with a message that would shake a nation, or Moses, who found his calling before a burning bush after 40 years in the wilderness, or even Jesus, who was led by the Spirit into the desert before beginning His public ministry. The pattern is consistent. The desert isn't a detour in the path of the chosen. It's an integral part of their formation. Your current desert may feel like punishment, but in God's economy, it's preparation. What you interpret as abandonment may actually be the most intense stage of your spiritual development. Moments of scarcity are divine laboratories where your faith is purified, your vision is sharpened, and your dependence on God is deepened. The promise of water in the desert doesn't just mean that God will meet your physical needs, though He certainly does. It also represents the provision of wisdom when you face impossible decisions, peace when anxiety threatens to consume you, and direction when all paths seem blocked. Water in the desert manifests in surprising and personalized ways for each chosen one. There's a communal dimension to this journey that we can't overlook. Notice that God says, "To give drink to my people, my chosen." The promise is both collective and individual. In moments of spiritual dryness, we often discover the importance of fellowship with other chosen ones who are drinking from the same supernatural source. Your desert experience isn't just for you, it's to strengthen the entire body of believers. As you progress in your spiritual journey, you learn to recognize the signs of water in the desert, that word that arrives at the exact right moment, that seemingly chance encounter that changes everything, that inexplicable peace in the midst of the storm. These aren't accidents or coincidences. They're tangible manifestations of the promise of Isaiah 43:20 at work in your life. The transformative secret of Isaiah 43:20 lies in a profound revelation that many readers overlook. God doesn't just provide water in the desert. He transforms the very nature of the desert. The Hebrew expression used here suggests not just the addition of something new to the environment, but a fundamental reconfiguration of the environment itself. When God says, "I will provide water in the wilderness and rivers in the wasteland," He is declaring His intention to turn places of death into sources of life, to transform spaces of scarcity into channels of abundance. This isn't a temporary modification, but a permanent reinvention of the territory. The desert doesn't remain a desert with a bit of water. It becomes a new ecosystem. Applying this truth to your life, we understand that God isn't merely offering momentary relief for your struggles. He's rewriting the nature of your circumstances. That relationship that seemed irreparably broken can become a source of restoration for many. That financial crisis can turn into a testimony of supernatural provision. That illness can become a platform for demonstrating God's healing power. Notice also the stated purpose of this transformation: to give drink to my people, my chosen. Divine intervention isn't just for your survival, but for your flourishing. The water in the desert isn't rationed in drops just enough to sustain life. It's rivers, abundant streams that enable growth, fruitfulness, and multiplication, even in unlikely environments. There's a prophetic dimension to this passage that points beyond immediate circumstances. Just as God promised to transform the physical desert for Israel, He promises to transform the spiritual, emotional, and circumstantial deserts in your life. This promise transcends time and geography. It's as relevant to you today as it was to the exiled Israelites thousands of years ago. The hallmark of God's chosen ones isn't the absence of deserts in their journey, but the presence of supernatural waters in their deserts. When others see only scorching sand, you find oases of grace. When others give up for lack of resources, you persevere because you know the source that never runs dry. This is the fundamental transformation that Isaiah 43:20 brings to your faith. Right, now as these words resonate in your spirit, something extraordinary is happening. God is activating the promise of Isaiah 43:20 in your life. That desert that seemed endless, that dryness that sapped your strength, that desolation that challenged your faith, everything is about to be transformed by the supernatural manifestation of divine waters. Close your eyes for a moment and visualize. Where there was only scorching sand, crystal clear springs now emerge. Where cracked soil bore witness to death and barrenness, rivers of abundant life now flow. This isn't a poetic metaphor, it's a spiritual reality manifesting in your life at this very moment. You didn't get here by chance. Every tear shed, every sleepless night, every seemingly unanswered prayer, all were part of the divine process to prepare you for this moment of transformation. The desert wasn't your final destination. It was merely the setting for the greatest miracle of your life. Feel the weight of this revelation now. You are the chosen one mentioned in Isaiah 43:20. Not because of your merits, not because of your perfection, not because of your ability to endure the desert, but by the sovereign decision of a God who loved you before the foundation of the world. Your identity as chosen doesn't depend on your performance, but on the unchanging word that declares, "To give drink to my people, my chosen." This is the moment to awaken to a new dimension of faith, a faith that doesn't just survive the desert but thrives in it, a faith that doesn't just wait for the trial to end, but celebrates transformation in the midst of the trial, a faith that recognizes that the God who promises water in the desert is the same God who transforms deserts into gardens. The revelation of Isaiah 43:20 isn't just to be understood intellectually, but to be lived intensely. The truth about God's chosen ones demands a concrete response, a shift in perspective, and a new stance in the face of life's deserts. First, acknowledge your current desert. Don't ignore it, don't minimize it, don't pretend it doesn't exist. Face it honestly, name it, and present it before God. The first step to experiencing water in the desert is admitting that you're truly in a desert. Second, reposition your expectation. Stop praying only to escape the desert and start praying to experience its transformation. The promise isn't evacuation, but irrigation. God didn't promise to remove all challenges from your life, but to supply you supernaturally in the midst of them. Third, claim your identity as chosen. Don't let arid circumstances define who you are. Your identity isn't determined by the environment around you, but by the divine declaration over you. Even in the harshest desert, you remain God's chosen, the recipient of His supernatural provision. Fourth, recognize the signs of water already emerging. Train your spiritual eyes to detect the subtle manifestations of divine grace already at work in your life. That inexplicable peace, that unexpectedly opened door, that resource that arrived at the exact moment, all are signs that Isaiah 43:20 is already being fulfilled in your experience. Finally, become a channel of divine waters for others in the desert. The promise isn't just for your personal benefit, but for you to become a conduit of God's grace to a thirsty world. When you share your testimony, when you reach out to someone in need, when you offer hope to a desperate heart, you're allowing the rivers in the wasteland to flow through you. If this message has touched your heart, I want you to do 3 things now. First, comment below "transformed desert." Second, share this video with someone going through a spiritual desert. And third, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep receiving revelations that will transform your faith. Remember, your faith will be transformed when you understand that the same God who allows the desert has already prepared the waters that will transform that desert. This is the truth about the chosen, not just survivors, but transformers of impossible environments through the supernatural power of the God who never fails to keep His promises.